Welcome to Stormin Chocolate. I'm Stormin Norman. Today we're doing song number 10, which is The Last Resort from the Eagles, appearing on the album Hotel California. Hotel California was released in 1976 in December, about 3 months after I landed in Germany for the last 3 years of high school. This was 10 months after their record company released their greatest hits, 1971 to 1975, in February. Hotel California was nominated for 5 Grammys and won 2 of them. The first one was Record of the Year for Hotel California. The second one was for New Kid in Town, which had the best vocal arrangement. Point of historical fact, Rumor was the album that won Album of the Year for 1977.
What was?
Rumors.
Oh.
Hotel California has been certified 32 million in worldwide sales as of late 2024, and 26 million of that 32 was in the United States alone. The only other countries that had more than 1 million in sales were France, Canada, and the UK. Rumors, on the other hand, only sold 40 million.
Wait, there's more.
That's wrong.
That's a callback to the first episode.
No, that's wrong.
But wait, that's more.
Yep, that's what I said. That's why they won the Best Album of the Year in 1977. And historically, they ended up selling more albums of Rumors than Hotel California. Now, there are only 3 other albums that have sold more than 20 million copies. Those albums are Thriller, Back in Black by AC/DC, and Led Zeppelin 4. The album produced 2 number 1 hits in the US. The first one was New Kid in Town, which hit number 1 in February of '77, and Hotel California itself 3 months later. The band had to push to get Hotel California to be released as a single because it was so long, 6.5 minutes long. The third single from the album was Life in the Fast Lane, which peaked at number 11. No other songs from the album were released as A-sides, only as B-sides, and The Last Resort was the B-side for Life in the Fast Lane.
Wait a minute. Life in the Fast Lane was on Hotel California? I thought it was in one of their albums from the 80s.
No. Wait, they didn't have any albums in the 80s.
Okay.
Wasted Time, Victim of Love, and Try and Love Again, other songs from the album, all seemed like they were singles released. However, they were B-sides, but got a lot of airplay because they were very popular songs. Only 2 songs do not get significant airplay, and those are Joe Walsh's song, Pretty Maids All in a Row, and today's song, The Last Resort. I didn't buy Hotel California for a long time, and I got it on CD. Again, I've joked about having to fill up my Tangerine Dream collection, which was a lot of work because Edgar Froese, the leader of Tangerine Dream, was putting out 3, 4, 5 albums a year sometimes, and the soundtracks and the Tangerine Dream albums and some of his solo work. He just couldn't get it all done through Tangerine Dream, so I was buying a lot of them. And I had heard a lot of Hotel California, so I didn't feel a need to fill out my collection. In the late 70s, early 80s, I was working as a DJ in Northern California when I was off to college, and The Long Run came out in 1979, 3 years after Hotel California, and I actually get a lot of the non-single songs mixed up between the albums. So there were songs that were on The Long Run that I actually thought were on Hotel California, and some of the songs that were on Hotel California that I actually thought were on The Long Run. The Last Resort, I thought, was on The Long Run because, it's the last song on the album, and it just kind of made sense that it would be the last song on The Long Run, which was the last Eagles record for a long time, pun intended. I really appreciate the craftsmanship of the Eagles, especially the lyrics. I love the rhyming and the meter, and these lyrics are paired with great music. 2 examples are Desperado and Peaceful Easy Feeling. Peaceful Easy Feeling was actually written by a buddy of the Eagles named Jack Temchin after he moved from San Diego to Southern California, and he was hanging out with Glenn Frey and Jackson Browne and J.D. Souther, all significant names surrounding the Eagles. And one day, Frey heard Jack singing this song, and he says, "Hey, this is pretty good. Do you mind if we try to develop it a little bit more?" And Jack says, "Knock yourself out." And the next day, Frey came back with a demo tape that the Eagles had kicked out the night before, and Jack was just blown away. He says, "This is totally awesome. Go ahead and put it on your first album with my blessing." The second example I gave was Desperado from the album of the same name. It was never released as an A-side single, but it was included on the greatest hits, 71 to 75, and it kind of found a home and grew in its popularity. This song was penned by the Glenn Frey, Don Henley duopoly. A lot of the songs of the Eagles are developed by the two of them. They're credited as the writers of the music and the lyrics. Some people like to compare them to the Lennon-McCartney duopoly, but I think it's fairly different. Usually Lennon and McCartney are credited solely to the songs, and they very rarely have another collaborator. So they were always very, very close-knit. Glenn Frey paired with Jackson Browne to pen Take It Easy. Now, Jackson Browne was never in the Eagles. On the other hand, Don Henley paired with Bernie Leadon, who was a member of the Eagles, for Witchy Woman. And then there's the case of Best of My Love, which was a collaboration between Frey, Henley, and J.D. Souther. The early songs of the Eagles were mostly about love and relationships, falling into and falling out of love. They were a bunch of dudes in Southern California with a bunch of California girls out there, and they did what comes naturally. So the lyrics were great and the songs were superb. Now, occasionally they would throw in a political song. For example, On the Border from the album of the same name, that was fairly political, about the man keeping them in line. Life in the Fast Lane from Hotel California was also political, being critical of the Southern California lifestyle. And The Last Resort is also very, very political. This was a time when Don Henley was developing his environmental thoughts and being very political and active in the world, in the U.S. The Last Resort is critical of the American dream in the form of manifest destiny. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the term, manifest destiny was the cultural and political belief of the Americas in the 1800s about settlers pushing across the Mississippi, cutting a swath of land from the Canadian border down to the Mexican border, where there were a lot of indigenous people already living, but it was felt to be a destiny for the Americans to push all the way to the Pacific, and it was basically manifest. It was their true destiny, and they lived that belief. So as I said, much of the land there was occupied by the indigenous population. Some people call them Indians or Native Americans. And the belief was they were living in harmony with the land, at one with nature. So that actually comes out in the song. There are some lyrics that talk about that in the first example. What this song is about then is the tendency for humans to find places that are ideal, paradises, if you will, and then despoil them. And the song covers three examples. The first example is a second-generation immigrant daughter who moves from New England to the Continental Divide, which is the place in America in the Rockies where just west of it, all of the rivers flow towards the west, towards the Pacific, and just east of that, all the rivers flow down to the Gulf of Mexico or even further to the Atlantic Ocean. So in this place, there's a mountain town she comes to. It sounds great. People are talking it up. They talk about the red man's ways and how they loved the land, but eventually they gave in to their baser animalistic instincts and ended up spoiling the land. In the second example, there's talk about the development of the LA Basin, which is portrayed sometimes in movies, most notably in Chinatown, where a developer put up a bunch of ugly boxes and people bought them, just trying to buy into the dream of Southern California. The third example takes place in Hawaii, where there was a corporate takeover of the islands from the sovereign nation there with the help of the U.S. government, and the people came in and spoiled the land again, decimated the population with the European diseases. Outside of the music, that third part kind of resonates with me because of my history. My grandmother retired to Hawaii and fell in love with a tour guide and lived there until the mid-'80s when she moved back to Texas. But in the 60s and 70s, my family would go over and live with her for about a month in the summertime. So I just feel very tied to the island of Maui and Lahaina, which is mentioned in this song. You can sail to Lahaina is the start of that part, and then the decimation of the Hawaiian Islands by the despoilers. The song has no choruses. It just has 8 verses in 3 sections covering the 3 different examples. The song is mostly piano, drums, and bass. There is some slide guitar during the second example. Don Henley is singing lead vocal, and there's no other vocals to sing of. They don't come in on the chorus because there are none, except at the end of the song where they just sing angelic, kind of stuff. I really love to sing along with the song, mainly because it fits in with a lot of my political beliefs, taking care of the land. I'm a quarter Indian from my father's side, who was half Indian. My brother looks a lot more Indian than I do, so you can see the family resemblance there. It is kind of hard to sing this song for me, being a bass, and sometimes I have to go off into falsetto, and then at the very end of the song, Don hits a very high note for him, which is kind of impossible for me, but I always give it a good college try. So in addition to singing along with it, the music does have a syncopated beat. In between the verses, the piano goes da-dun, da-dun, dun. And so I really like that. And that's kind of what drew me in first, because it's the first thing you hear before he starts singing. So looking back at the song, we can see that the manifest destiny was based upon the belief of American exceptionalism, that we are a special people in a special country, which can also be traced back, some people think, to the Puritan people who came to the U.S. in order to seek religious freedom. Each section has a line that says they call it paradise in reference to different parts of the example at that time. And this kind of lends it to the belief that it's paradise. We don't really know why, but we love it and we hate it. And we're not really sure if it's always talking about an earthly paradise or a hereafter paradise. So the term the last resort can be interpreted 2 ways. It could either be talking about the West Coast, the LA Basin, or Hawaii as the last place towards the West that Americans travel to have a good time, to take a vacation. Or it could be about singers and musicians in the entertainment industry being the ones pointing out about all of this despoiling of paradise so the rest of the world can actually take action. It's the last resort of humanity in order to save these places. So that's it for The Last Resort by the Eagles from Hotel California. Next time, we'll wander through the meadows with Joe Walsh from the album The Smoker You Drink, The Player You Get. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Brady did that.
Yeah, this is number 10. That's number 11. 11 and 12 were really short ones, so we kicked them out because I had just memorized them. And then we had to go back and do the 2 long ones, Song 10 and Song 9. We had a small window, and we knocked them out of the park.